So, as Vasil mentioned, I'm here to speak about 6 tips to drive retention in 2020 and beyond. And obviously, I feel strongly about this. I founded Brightback last year and did so out of San Francisco. We're a team of 18 people. We're a Series A company, and it was born from a need. And the need has been around the fact that, for the last many years, we've spent millions of dollars acquiring customers, converting them from leads into paying users, into long-term repeat purchasers. And yet at the same time, most of our companies and our subscription businesses are churning 30 to 50% or more per year of their customers. And so it lends itself to this question of how is it we've gotten to the point where we've invested in almost every aspect of the customer journey and the customer life cycle, and only today we're really hitting the point where we're recognizing in the funding cycle that the industry's in, and at the stage and the level of saturation that most industries are in, that retention is truly becoming sort of the first-class citizen today. And so, as mentioned, Brightback is based out of San Francisco. We are working with subscription companies that typically have high-volume bases, like Copper, Crazy Egg, SparkPost, consumer-facing companies as well. And the problem we're solving is that it's very difficult to maintain and retain customers in this segment when you can't throw human beings to work with every one of your customers. I previously experienced this at Autopilot, before that at Zendesk. These are companies where we leveraged a lot of approaches to be able to improve retention and the experience through the life cycle. And a lot of it all happens through in-house growth testing and evolutions. So today I'll be talking about why is retention important, share a little bit about the state of industry. We've done some independent research in the last year, and then talk about 6 steps to build a churn funnel as an approach that's not widely known right now, but one that is highly effective and that many companies are actually utilizing. So a little bit sort of the main landscape. 2019 has obviously been a big year for tech. It's been on the good and the bad. We've had very successful IPOs in the subscription space. Companies like Zoom, PagerDuty, who's speaking next, have been very well rewarded for having built terrific companies with extremely strong product market fit. They're winning based on experience. But even more so, what companies are doing really well now is they're winning at the margins. It's not good enough just to have a great product. It's not good enough even just to be winning based on the experience, because the best companies have tremendous experiences across the board. There's actually a lot of testing and evolving that goes on. The operational metrics that we need to understand from a retention perspective and how to improve require continuous work. So for example, the head of growth for a very well-known, one of the biggest companies that went public in the last few years, they invested a year in some of the methods that I'm talking about today, and the first year generated $10 million of retained revenue by implementing testing approaches essentially at the Peripheries. And it's important. This really, really adds up. When we hear about Slack and Zendesk and how quickly they grew, this right here is a view of what happens if you have 2 companies with exactly the same top-of-funnel acquisition, so new MRR. And if you extend out over a 5-year period and you look at the difference between a 3 percentage point difference in net churn can result in $10 million in ARR difference. And then by a 6.5% difference, so a company that has negative net retention versus positive net retention, a 6.5% difference results in a $42 million ARR loss over a 5-year period. So investing early in great product market fit, improving the customer experience, and testing and evolving at the Peripheries has a huge impact on the long-term growth of a company, and is something that companies have cottoned onto well. And then lastly, growing through retention is critically important because the channels that we have for growth there's no longer as many new channels as there used to be, right? The number of opportunities to grow through acquisition, like lead acquisition cost, ad rates, everything overall acquisition costs have increased fairly dramatically. On the flip side, according to the 2017 Pacific Wave survey, $1 of revenue acquired costs $1.16, where it's 16 cents on the dollar to retain a customer. So it's 7x more expensive to grow through acquisition through retention. Does that mean we don't grow through acquisition? Of course not. We're doing that all the time. But it does mean that there's substantial advantages to investing early in retention as you might an acquisition channel. Today's marketers, we're seeing more and more VP of retention marketing, CMO who owns retention marketing and customer marketing. We're seeing these titles emerge as marketers are now aligning their acquisition funnels, not just on MQLs to SQLs to wins, but now all the way through to LTV, which is a critically important point as we think about growth in the subscription economy. So again, we wanted to get a little bit of awareness of the state of industry. So quick question, how many people in this room are in a subscription business today? Okay, so probably like 60, 70%. And how many people in the room would you say you have a clear retention or churn goal within your company that's broadly understood and is structured around as a company? So kind of low hands, probably, I don't know, probably 20, 30%, I would guess. A recent survey, a recent webinar we did, we asked the same set of questions. About 30% of people said yes. So, we're at a point now where in our survey, one of the first questions we asked was, is retention a high priority for you? This is with 332 CEOs, founders, and executives in subscription businesses. And people said, yes, of course. It's a big win. It's an area that companies are investing. And it makes sense, right? The customer is in control today. As I said, there's not as many channels for growth. And the MarTech landscape, all you got to do is look at the Scott Brinker slide, and now I think we're up to probably 7,000 companies. As my customer, Crazy Egg, said recently in a webinar, he said, since Oprah stopped being on TV, it's gone from 300 to 7,000 companies. So the point is the space has grown like crazy. But if we break that down and maybe take a look at B2B versus B2C, we start to see that the percentage of companies that feel that retention is appropriately prioritized starts to drop significantly from that 97%. So on B2B, 68% said yes, they do, which makes sense because B2B typically is complex, process-oriented, training is important, we're dealing with niche markets, reputation matters. Whereas on the B2C side, there's a sense of almost limitless reach, right? Infinite consumers in most spaces, and it still is driven primarily by signups and weekly active users. But at the same time, we're starting to see this shift now. Repeat buyers, not first-time buyers. Net refers as opposed to active users. So we're seeing substantial change there in terms of retention focus across both. We also see a lot of interest on the consumer side around how to improve retention when often churn rates can be 70% or more on a yearly basis, which is quite incredible. So the next point is that companies are turning to discounts and deals to retain customers. There's many tactics that companies use, but that's an important one. And one of the things we talk about here is how can that be done in a more systematic and organized fashion to get results for a company. So that's where we talk to 6 steps to building a churn funnel. So first of all, what is a churn funnel? Right? A churn funnel is an approach for converting savable customers back to your business using information, behavioral information, as well as data we have about that user, such that we can create personalized experiences to delight and retain the customer. Another important output of a churn funnel is being able to gather insightful information about why customers are leaving and when, so you can improve and improve the product and the service upstream. And that really is where we see a lot of the biggest impact from being very systematic about understanding and managing churn. So the first step is ditch your exit survey and build a true churn funnel. So what does that mean? Again, running exit surveys at the point of cancel is a forgotten micro moment that very few companies actually do. And when they do, typically that data is static. It lives in a Survey Gizmo or a SurveyMonkey, or it lives in a product data warehouse. It gets analyzed once a quarter and gets used for planning and prioritization purposes. On the flip side, those customers are telling you exactly why they're leaving. They're answering with their wallets. And they're actually they're typically at the point of cancel, very honest. You can read the raw comments people make. They align directly with the reasons that they've indicated on a survey. And if you can engage at that moment and respond to their needs and identify those of the unfulfilled needs, and in doing so, resolve the problem they have, most customers, a minority, but an important segment of customers haven't actually not found or disliked your service. It's often they never reach the point where they initially need to engage to begin with. And we'll get more to that. So first of all, we break this down into 3 segments. Those that we've identified as being at-risk accounts. Secondly, those that we can engage and learn from with personalized experiences. And then third is actually retaining those customers to drive incremental revenue and improvements in your service. So how do we identify? First of all, it comes down to segmenting your customers and personalizing their cancel experience. So again, we want to think about the fact that customers cancel throughout the buying life cycle, right? They cancel within minutes of signing up. They'll do so within 3 days, they'll do so within 3 months, and they'll do so within 3 years. At different points in time, they do so for different reasons. So for example, after someone's first signed up, they might cancel because of the fact they will clearly not have time to use the service in the next 30 days, and so they're going to cancel and they'll come back next month. What if you could pause the service? Another set of customers maybe cancel right after they've actually implemented time and effort, and there's been a short-term business shift in a need, so they're going to come back at a future point in time. They haven't necessarily disliked your service or not recognized value, but they certainly haven't yet achieved the desired outcome. Maybe customers have actually been using the service for a while, have onboarded and trained and started to expand, and now they're seeing mismatches between the value that they're receiving and the price they're paying. Again, it doesn't mean that, that they necessarily dislike the service, but we all know that most companies haven't perfectly nailed our pricing strategies. I think we all wish we did, but it rarely happens, and there's friction points along the way. Regular testing and understanding that currency, that exchange rate between value and cost, which is price, is an important piece to understanding why customers leave and improving that. So second is to segment your users into key dimensions. So we have found that recognizing that customers who pay monthly versus annual, or those that are active users or using key features or have a certain frequency of use, or those that are pre-onboarded, maybe they're in the first 30 days, the first 90 days. A lot of companies see significant drop-off in adoption and usage after a 30-day mark and a 90-day mark and so on. The value of the customer, which correlates to both the potential value they see in your product and service, as well as the level of resourcing you can invest in retaining and working with those customers. Each of these areas provide important segmentation dimensions by which, if you can split down into customers, for example, who are on a trial plan and are paying monthly, you may be much more willing to make an extension offer to them if they agree to move to an annual plan than you might be if they are in another scenario. So first of all is understanding and segmenting by key dimensions and recognizing where your opportunities lie. From there, we can create loss aversion and celebrate last successes. So we're leveraging some human psychology here. We're anchoring the customer back to the initial reason that brought them to your service to begin with. Maybe they wanted, in this case, to be able to measure analytics on their site. They've added team members. They've created dashboards. They've integrated their favorite tools. We want to remind the users and the customers why they exactly came, as well as provide an opportunity to personalize the experiences they'll take as they go through a cancel. Again, we do a lot of this during the acquisition phase, and yet as companies, we typically say buy at the end when a customer leaves or have a very perfunctory sort of end note. Instead, we can actually create a real experience here, and in doing so, increase engagement, increase positive emotion and positive reaction, and increase responses. So we've now segmented and understood how to present a personalized experience to our customer. The third thing is to understand categorically why customers leave. And this is really important because it's one thing to just understand why customers leave for almost for vanity reasons or from a perfunctory perspective, but really to be actionable, we need to be able to tie cancellation reasons to specific sources that can be taken. So for example, like I said before, we see that probably about 20% of customers cancel for the wrong reasons, actionable reasons. The most commonly saved reason across our platform, and we benchmark a lot of this, is customers who never onboarded to begin with or never figured out how to use the service. Another is misunderstood product. So they think they don't have access to products or services they actually do, or features. Third is a poor customer experience can have a dramatic impact, as everybody in this room knows. It can also be overcome by listening to your customer and engaging them in the right way at the right time very effectively. Fourth is pricing. Again, there's often inefficiencies and friction points along the growth path that, again, engaged in the right way in a sensitive fashion can significantly increase the likelihood to retain that customer. And then often new stakeholders or changes in the business outlook can result in replacements of products. We all know this very well. Occasionally those can be retained by engaging at the right time in the right way and re-onboarding a new executive or a new team. There's also an example of non-savable or non-influenceable churn. Needs or interests dramatically change, business model shifts, poor performance or reliability, fundamental breaches of trust, too complicated or poor user experience can result in cultural misalignment between buyers and products, or downsizing and going out of business. And yet in each of these situations, we may not be able to retain those customers, but we can certainly learn a lot from them and use that to prioritize the internal discussions that we need to have to involve and improve, when is it time to refactor back-end versus new feature development. So having a systematic gauge of long-term impacts of the actions you're taking is critically important when looking at how pricing, for example, might impact retention over time. So this leads to systematically building churn intelligence. So being able to gather and run a cancel survey where you actually ask the customers why they're leaving and be able to map that into categories and reasons that can be drilled into, that can be trended, and then you can match quantitative and qualitative information. So what's the voice of the customer, what are they actually telling you, and how have different investments you've made over the last period of time resulted in shifts in hopefully what you do is you reduce the amount of cancellations that are controllable until you get to the point where most of your cancellations are not controllable anymore. That's typically multifactorial. Again, once we have a good handle and we have a systematic approach for understanding why people cancel, we can invest and align short-term product fixes, success motions, sales and marketing fit, definitions of ICP. These are all outcomes that come from starting to get a good handle on the cadences and the reasons why customers are leaving. So things that I've seen that are really interesting, companies sort of refactoring the features that are included in their trials because they realize from systematic testing that they're giving away too much or maybe not enough in their trials, and therefore they're not winning customers. Others could be improvements in the way in which they're engaging customers, adding live chat or removing live chat as an example. There's many reasons and many ways in which people can improve their products here, but definition of ICP is often a common reason why people are struggling with retention is they're actually targeting the wrong users to begin with. So the best way to learn that is see what's the associated lifetime value of your customers, and those that are low lifetime value with sort of erratic reasons, often tied to no need or couldn't execute or pricing mismatches, will give you an indication that you really are targeting the wrong users and it's time to refocus on the right users. You can also recognize gaps in your onboarding. So for example, we've seen customers find that that users are canceling even though they have access to content or training or best practices at the company that they never found. So being able to tie that back specifically to poor onboarding and then be able to reuse assets that have been generated can be tactically prioritized and driven through understanding why customers are canceling. So fourth, so we're talking about engage and learn here. So now we've segmented our customers. We're systematically understanding why they leave. We have a categorical approach to measuring that, which is driving the right level of learning internally. Now the point comes to let's test and evolve tailored save offers. So customers are telling you why they're leaving. Again, we think there's 15 to 20% of people who are leaving who actually, if you could identify them at the right time, you could win them back and retain them as a customer. To do that obviously requires testing a lot of different approaches. And this isn't something that sort of we came out of the blue. This is being done today all the time by many of the big tech companies. If you cancel your Audible account with Amazon, you'll be offered to pause your subscription instead of that. My personal story is my first company, CVS Dude, years ago. We started building an exit survey, kind of like the Facebook page, and we found the number one reason why people canceled was their projects were ending. We were hosting source code. So we created an archive plan, which is like a pause, and we joked that was our first hit product in quite some time. That product took off like crazy as everyone started pausing their plans, and it did directly impact our retention quite dramatically. Another option is downgrade instead, whether that's go from an annual to a monthly plan, or instead of canceling outright, drop from the $20 to the $12.99 per month plan. Downgrading plans can provide an excellent alternative to losing a customer outright. And this is an example from our customer Crazy Egg that I recently shared with Sunit, who's the GM there, on a webinar. And they had started off recognizing that pricing was a major source of cancellation for them, both for their trial customers, which have to enter their credit card before they can use the service, and they must cancel, as well as for their paying customers. So they started off with a fairly generic offer, which was, take a discount, essentially, instead of canceling, and they got so-so responses. They then got creative and said, how about you tell us what you'll pay for a one-year version of Crazy Egg? We'll honor it, And the only thing we ask is we insist that you take a 30-minute consultation with us so we can review your account, improve, apply best practices, and you have to extend to an annual plan. So they actually had a 5x increase in the acceptance rate. To almost 60% of people who see that will click that now, which shows that by being nuanced to the exact customer they're messaging to, mixing value, training, learning experience with giving control to the customer, they're able to have a dramatic impact in a specific area. And this came through through a series of tests that helped them achieve this outcome. So the fifth major step is to retain your customers. And this really needs to happen in two ways. One, again, we aren't just statically capturing data here. We need to be able to action it. We need to be able to trigger workflow and alerts through your go-to-market tool stack. I know this is a very busy slide, but maybe I'll tweet an image of this later on so it's online, you can see it. But companies that have aligned their tooling around the customer journey are those that tend to retain customers and acquire customers more effectively over time. So this starts with a view of when your customer becomes a paying customer, creating an account in your CRM automatically, matching that with your subscription billing platform so you can map accurate revenue data in, and then using that to sync with your engagement tools, whether that's AppQues and Pendo and Iterable and Autopilot and Intercom, as well as success tools and support tools, so Zendesk, Gainsight, and so on. Being deeply embedded within the ecosystem of tools that you're using such that you can identify customers at key moments and then trigger workflow is critically important, and it's one of the views that we took as we've built out Brightback, is it needs to play nicely within the existing stack that exists today. And most areas are fairly well covered at this point. There's a lot of selections around how to accomplish this, but the critical piece is taking a customer journey-centric view to creating an automated pathway where you can have online as well as directly managed processes. So in the case of subscription, for example, creating transactions for a new person, a new purchase, an expansion, a contraction, a churn automatically, and the amounts associated will dramatically change the way you think about live insight into what's working and what's not when you match that with product usage data and others. So finally, it brings us to the sixth step here, which is in retaining customers, which is aligning around your true north. The true north for most companies ultimately is a revenue metric, an ARR growth metric, which in turn is driven by experience, delight, and conversion. So we believe it's important to align around that true north. And so at Brightback, we are talking about how to help companies test and evolve to grow your save rate, and in doing so, drive incremental revenue. An incremental revenue being revenue that you would have lost if you hadn't engaged and retained these customers. And so the way we think about that is, again, we have identify customers that are at risk, engage them by adding them to a watch list, which happens automatically on a session basis, engaging those in a watch list through automated or manual type ways in order to save them. And so the examples there could be a triggered workflow through Zapier where you can start to send emails to customers who are on watch lists for specific reasons. Or someone has just canceled who never onboarded to begin with and they said they're highly likely to return. That's somebody you should reach out to quickly and offer to re-onboard them and jump in and help them however you like. These are the types of workflows that can be built out when we start to get systematic about those who are at risk, those that can be engaged, and then those that cancel. Again, cancellation is also helpful and good because you're getting straight from the horse's mouth why and how they've left. Many of them you will recover at a future point in time, and the rest of them are telling you directly why they've left to begin with. And the benefit of doing a cancel flow-based interception is that you can get 100% coverage. So every customer will tell you briefly. Of course, that means you have to be extremely sensitive to the user experience and not create barriers so much as create an opportunity to learn and actually deliver a proactive support experience. And from this, we calculate a save percentage, which is the percentage of people that showed the indication of canceling and then didn't cancel within a period of time. And of course, that's directly tying back up to your North Star metric. But even more important than the short-term retention of these customers is how does that perform over time? We're obviously not doing our companies a favor if we're simply retaining and turning over customers in the short term. We want to be solving customers' problems and fulfilling needs that aren't currently met. And to do that, that means that we have to be targeted in the right way with the right offer, which could be training, it could be support, it could be discount offers, it could be extensions, it could be a whole realm of potentials. But if you solve their problem, they should stick around, and you should be able to measure that through a cohort retention of those saved cohorts. So the second piece here is optimize for your save rate in the short term, and then secondly, optimize for how well those customers are retained over the coming few months or years. So key takeaways. First of all, ditch your exit survey and invest in or build a customer churn funnel. It's an area of opportunity that's not on the radar currently in a very effective way, and yet most companies are doing it, particularly those with the resources and the time to do so. Segment your customers and personalize their cancel experience, exactly the way that Dan was describing earlier today around a personalized customer journey when you're acquiring and marketing. Why not be doing the same with the people that we know the most about, which is those who've been your paying customers for a long period of time? Third, understand why customers leave systematically and use that insight to prioritize internal efforts and to improve. 4, commit to a testing and evolution tailored workflow around how to save these customers. And again, we think of them as saves, but really we are identifying customers with unmet needs and retaining those as opposed to force blocking people from canceling services. That's going to result in complaints and negative impact on the brand that ultimately fails. 5th, automate alerts and retention workflow in your go-to-market stack. There's a lot of tools out there today. There's a lot of great opportunities to be better at what we've done than ever before. The trick is you need to take a journey-centric approach to understanding and making sure you're capturing the states of your customer as they flow through your engagement stack so you can engage consistently in a personalized fashion across channels. And then finally is optimize for incremental revenue. And incremental revenue will be driven by a number of factors. It doesn't mean just purely focusing on the dollars, but an outcome of having a good experience and solving your customers' problems is they'll be repeat purchasers and referrers. In that sense, optimizing around incremental revenue really helps differentiate the noise from the signal. With that, I'm going to end there. Thank you.
I need some traction. You need some traction. Let's get some traction.